Chapter 7. Brinker Hadley came across to see me late that afternoon. I had taken a shower to wash off the sticky salt of the Nagumasset River. Going into Devon was like taking a refreshing shower itself. You never had to clean up after it. But the Nagumasset was something else entirely. I had never been in it before. It seemed appropriate that my baptism there had taken place on the first day of this winter season, and that I had been thrown into it in the middle of a fight. I washed the traces off me and then put on a pair of chocolate brown slacks, a pair which Phineas had been particularly critical of when he was wearing them, and a blue flannel shirt. Then, with nothing to do until my French class at 5 o'clock, I began turning over in my mind this question of sports. But Brinker came in. I think he made a point of visiting all the rooms near him the first day. Well, Jean, his beaming face appeared around the door. Brinker looked the standard preparatory school article in his grey gabardine suit with square, hand-sewn-looking jacket, pockets, a conservative necktie, and a dark brown cordovan shoes. His face was all straight lines, eyebrows, mouth, nose, everything, and he carried his 6 feet of height straight as well. He looked but happened not to be athletic. Being too busy with politics, arrangements, and offices, there was nothing idiocentric about Brinker unless you saw him from behind. I did, as he turned to close the door after him. The flaps of his gabardine jacket parted slightly over his healthy rump, and it is that, without any sense of derision at all, that I recall as Brinker's salient characteristic, those healthy, determined, not over-exaggerated, but definite and substantial buttocks. Here you are in your solitary splendor. He went on genuinely. I can see you have a real influence around here. This big room all to yourself. I wish I knew how to manage things like you. He grinned confidingly and sank down on my cot, leaning on his elbow in a relaxed, at-home way. It didn't seem fitting for Brinker Hadley, the hub of the class, to be congratulating me on influence. I was going to say that while he had a roommate, it was frightened Brownie Perkins who would never impinge on Brinker's comfort in any ways, and that they had 2 rooms, the front one with a fireplace. Not that I grudged him any of this. I liked Brinker in spite of his winter season efficiency. Almost everyone liked Brinker, but in the pause I looked before replying, he started talking in his light-hearted way again. He never let a dull spot appear in conversation if he could help it.
Oh, but you knew all the time Finn will not be back this fall. That's why I picked him for a roommate, right? What? I pulled quickly around in my chair away from the desk and faced him. No, of course not. How could I know a thing like that in advance? Brinker glanced swiftly at me. You fixed it, smiled widely. You knew all the time. I'll bet it was all you're doing. Don't be another Brinker. I turned back toward the desk and began moving books with rabid pointlessness. What a crazy thing to say. My voice sounded too strange even to my own blood-pounded ears. Ah, the truth hurts, eh? I looked at him as sharply as eyes can look. He had struck an accusing pause. Sure. I gave a short laugh. Sure. Then these words came out of me by themselves. But the truth will out. His hand fell literally on my shoulder. Rest assured of that, my son. In a free democracy, even fighting for its life, the truth will out. I got up. I feel like a smoke, don't you? Let's go down to the butt room. Yes, to the dungeon with him. The butt room was something like a dungeon. It was in the basement or the bowels of the dormitory. There was about 10 smokers already there. Everyone at Devon had many public faces. In class, we looked, if not exactly scholarly, at least respectably alert. On the playing fields, we looked like innocent extroverts, and in the butt room, we looked very strongly like criminals. The school's policy, in order to discourage smoking, was to make these rooms as depressing as possible. The windows near the ceiling were small and dirty. The old leather furniture spilled its inwards. The tables were mutilated, the walls ash-colored, the floor concrete. A radio with a faulty connection played loud and rasping for a while, and then suddenly quiet and insinuating. Here's your prisoner, gentlemen, announced Brinker, seizing my neck and pushing me into the butt room ahead of him. I'm turning him over to the proper authorities. High spirits came hard in the haze of the butt room. A slammed figure near the radio, which happened to be playing loud at that moment, finally roused himself to say, What is the charge? Doing away with his roommate so he could have a whole room to himself. Rank as treachery. He paused impressively. Practically fratricide. With a snap of the neck, I shook his hand off me. My teeth set. Brinker raised an arresting hand. Not a word, not a sound. You will have your day in court. God damn it, shut up. I swear to God, you write a joke longer than anybody I know. It was a mistake. The radio had suddenly gone quiet and my voice ringing in the abrupt releasing hash galvanized them all. So you killed him, did you? A boy uncalled tensely from the couch. Well, Brinker qualified judicially. Not actually killed. Finn is hanging between life and death at home in the arms of his grief-stricken old mother. I had to take part in this or risk losing control completely. I didn't do hardly anything. I began as easily as it was possible for me to do. All I did was drop a little bit, a little pinch of arsenic in his morning coffee.
Liar, Brinker glowered at me. Trying to weasel out of it with a false confession, huh? I laughed at that. Laughed uncontrollably for a moment at that. We know the scene of the crime, Brinker went on. High in that funeral tree by the river. There wasn't any poison, nothing as subtle as that. Oh, you know about the tree. I tried to let my face fall guiltily, but it felt instead as though it were being dragged downward. Yes, there was a little country temps at the tree. No one was diverted from the issue by this triad of funny French pronunciation. Tell us everything, a younger boy at the table said huskily. There was an unsettling current in his voice, a genuinely conspiratorial note, as though he believed literally everything that had been said. His attitude seemed to be almost obscene, the attitude of someone who discovers a sexual secret of yours and promises not to tell a soul if you will describe it in detail to him. Well, I replied in a stronger voice. First I stole all his money. Then I found out that he cheated on his entrance test to Devon, and I blackmailed his parents about that. Then I made love to his sister in Mr. Ludsbury's study. It was going well. Faint grins were appearing around the room. Even the younger boy seemed to suspect that he was being sincere about a joke, a bad mistake to make at Devon. Then I only had to add, pushed him out of the tree, and the chain of implausibility would be complete. Just those few words, and perhaps this dungeon nightmare would end. But I can feel my throat closing on them. I can never say them. Never. I swung on the younger boy. What did I do then? I demanded. I'll bet you've got a lot of theories. Come on, reconstruct the crime. There we were at the tree. Then what happened, Sherlock Holmes? His eyes swung guiltily back and forth. Then you just pushed him off, I bet. Lousy bet, I said offhandedly, falling into a chair as though losing interest in the game. You lose. I guess you're Dr. Watson after all. They laughed at him a little, and he squirmed and looked guiltier than ever. He had a very weak foothold among the butt-room crowd, and I had pretty well pushed him off it. His glance flickered out at me from his defeat, and I saw to my surprise that I had, by making a little fun of him, brought upon myself his unmixed hatred. For my escape, this was a price I was willing to pay. French, I exclaimed. Enough of this contretemps. I've got to study my French, and I went out. Going up the stairs, I heard a voice from the butt room say, Funny, he came all the way down here and didn't even have a smoke. But this was a clue they soon seemed to forget. I detected no Sherlock Holmes among them, nor even a Dr. Watson. No one showed any interest in tracking me, no one pried, no one insinuated. The daily lists of appointments lengthened with the rays of the receding autumn sun. Until the summer, the opening day, even yesterday, became, by the middle of October, something gotten out of the way and forgotten, because tomorrow bristled with so much to do. In addition to classes and sports and clubs, there was
thick, gray woolen scarf. Then at last I recognized a face in the midst of them. Lepers, pinched and pink, his eyes peering curiously towards some distant woods through steel-rimmed glasses. As I got nearer, I noticed that below his long tan canvas coat with sagging pockets, below the red and black plaid woolen knickers and green puttees, he was wearing skis. They were very long, wooden and battered, and had two decorative old-fashioned knobs on their tips. You think there's a path through those woods? He asked in his mild, tentative voice when I got near. Leper did not switch easily from one train of thought to another, and even though I was an old friend whom he had not talked to in months, I didn't mind his taking me for granted now, even at this improbable meeting in a wide, empty field of snow. I'm not sure, Leper, but I think there's one at the bottom of the slope. Oh yeah, I guess there is. We always called him Leper to his face. He wouldn't have remembered to respond to any other name. I couldn't keep from staring at him, at the burlesque explorer look of him. What are you? I asked at last. What are you doing anyway? I'm touring. Touring? I examined the long bamboo ski poles he held. How do you mean, touring? Touring. It's the way you get around the countryside in the winter. Touring skiing. It's how you go overland in the snow. Where are you going? Well, I'm not going anywhere. He bent down to tighten the lacings on a putty. I'm just touring around. There's that place across the river where you could ski. The place where they have the rope tow on that steep hill across from the railroad station. You could go over there. No, I don't think so. He surveyed the woods again, although his breath had fogged his glasses. That's not skiing. Why, sure that's skiing. It's a good little run. You can get going pretty fast on that hill. Yeah, but that's it. That's why it isn't skiing. Skiing isn't supposed to be fast. Skis are for useful locomotion. He turned his inquiring eyes on me. You can break a leg with that downhill stuff. Not on that little hill. Well, it's the same thing. It's part of the whole wrong idea. They're ruining skiing in this country. Rope tows and chairlifts and all that stuff. You get carted up, and then you whiz back down. You never get to see the trees or anything. Oh, you see a lot of trees shoot by, but you never get to really look at trees. At a tree. I just like to go along and see what I'm passing and enjoy myself. He had come to an end of his thought, and now he slowly took me in, noticing my layers of old clothes. What are you doing, anyway? He asked mildly and curiously. Going to work on the railroad. He kept gazing mildly and curiously at me. Shovel out those tracks. The work they talked about in the chapel this morning. You remember? Have a nice day at it anyway, he said. I will. You too. I will if I find what I'm looking for. A beaver dam. It used to be up the Devon a ways, in a little stream that flows into the Devon. It's interesting to see the way beavers adapt to the winter. Have you ever seen it? No, I never have seen that. Well, you might want to come sometime if I find the place. Tell me if you find it. With Leper was always a fight, a hard fight to win when you were 17 years old and lived in a keyed-up, competing school to avoiding making fun of him. But as I had gotten to know him better, this fight had been easier to win. Shoving in his long bamboo poles, he pushed deliberately forward and slid slowly away from me down the gradual slope, standing very upright, his skis far apart to guard against any threat to his balance, his poles sticking out on either side of him as though to ward off any interference. I turned and trudged off to help shovel out New England for the war. We spent an odd day toiling in that railroad yard. By the time we arrived there, the snow had become drab and sooted, wet and heavy. We were divided into gangs, each under an old railroad man. Brinker, Chet, and I managed to be in the same group, but the playful atmosphere of the apple orchard was gone. Out of the town we could only see some dull red brick mills and warehouses surrounding the yards, and we labored away among what the old man directing us called rolling stock, grim freight cars from many parts of the country immobilized in the snow. Brinker asked him if it shouldn't be called unrolling stock now, and the old man looked back at him with bleary dislike and didn't reply. Nothing was very funny that day. The work had become hard and unvarying. I began to sweat under my layers of clothes. By the middle of the afternoon, we had lost our fresh volunteer look. The grime of the railroad and the exhaustion of manual laborers were on us all. We seemed of a piece
the railroad yards and the mills and warehouses. The old man resented us, or we made him nervous, or maybe he was as sick as he looked. For whatever reason, he grumbled and spat and alternated between growling orders and rubbing his big unhealthy belly. Around 4:30 there was a moment of cheer. The main line had been cleared, and the first train rattled slowly through. We watched it advance toward us, the engine throwing up balls of steam to add to the heavy overcast. All of us lined both sides of the track and got ready to cheer the engineer and passengers. The coach windows were open, and the passengers surprisingly were hanging out. They were all men. I could discern all young, all alike. It was a troop train. Over the clatter and banging of the wheels and couplings we cheered and they yelled back, both sides taken by surprise. They were not much older than we were, and although probably just recruits. They gave the impression of being an elite as they were carried past our drop rings. They seemed to be having a wonderful time. The uniforms looked new and good. They were clean and energetic. They were going places. After they had gone, we laborers looked rather emptily across the newly cleared rails at each other, at ourselves, and not even Brinker thought of a timely remark. We turned away. The old man told us to go back to the other parts of the yard, but there was no more real work done that afternoon. Stranded in this Milltown railroad yard, while the whole world was converging elsewhere, we seemed to be nothing but children playing among heroic men. The day ended at last. Gray from the beginning, its end was announced by deepening gray of sky, snow, faces, spirits. We piled back into the old dispiritedly lit coaches. Waiting for us, slumped into the uncomfortable green seats, and no one said much until we were miles away. When we did speak, it was about aviation training programs and brothers in the service and requirements for enlistment and the futility of Devon, and how we would never have war stories to tell our grandchildren, and how long the war might last, and who ever heard of studying dead languages at a time like this? Quackenbush took advantage of a break in the line of conversation to announce that he would certainly stay at Devon through the year, however half-cocked others might rush off. He elaborated without encouragement, citing the advantages of Devon's physical hardening program and a high school diploma. When he did in good time reach basic training, he, for one, would advance into the army step by step. "You, for one," echoed someone contemptuously. "You are one," someone else said. "Which army, Quackenbush? Mussolini's?" "Nah, he's a cross spy." "How many rails did you sabotage today, Quackenbush?" "I thought they entered all Quackenbushes a day after Pearl Harbor." To which Brinker added, "They didn't find him. He hid his light under a quackenbush." They were all tired at the end of that day. Walking back to the school grounds from the railroad station in the descending darkness, we overtook a long figure sliding down the snow-covered edge of the street. "Will you look at Lapellier?" began Brinker irritably. "Who does he think he is? The abominable snow woman?"
Others, the Quackenbushes of this world, could calmly watch the war approach them and jump into it at the last and most advantageous instant as though buying it into the stock market. But I couldn't. There was no one to stop me but myself. Putting aside soft reservations about what I owed Devon and my duty to my parents and so on, I reckoned my responsibilities by the light of the unsentimental night sky and knew that I owed no one anything. I owed it to myself to meet this crisis in my life when I choose, and I choose now. I bounced zestfully up the dormitory stairs, perhaps because my mind still retained the image of the sharp night stars, those few fixed points of light in the darkness, perhaps because of that the warm yellow light streaming from under my own door came as such a shock. It was a simple case of a change of expectation. The light should have been off. Instead, as though alive itself, it poured in a thin yellow slab of brightness from under the door, illuminating the dust and splinters of the hall floor. I grabbed the knob and swung open the door. He was seated in my chair at the desk, bending down to adjust the gross encumbrance of his leg so that only the familiar ears set close against his head were visible, and his short-cut brown hair. He looked up with a provocative grin. "Hi, pal, where's the brass band?" Everything that had happened throughout the day faded like that first false snowfall of the winter. Phineas was back.